Have you ever heard of a battle where an army of peasants and craftsmen, armed with little more than pikes and farm tools, brought down the most fearsome fighting force in Europe? A battle so shocking that its name comes from the hundreds of golden spurs stripped from the bodies of fallen nobles? Well, get ready, because today we're diving into the muddy, bloody fields of Kortrijk for one of history's greatest underdog stories, the Battle of the Golden Spurs. If you enjoy fascinating historical deep dives like this, consider subscribing to stay up to date on our next videos. This wasn't just any medieval skirmish, this was a revolution. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to the late 13th century. The county of Flanders, what is now part of Belgium, was a real medieval powerhouse. Cities like Bruges, Ghent, and Ypres were the epicenters of Europe's textile trade, fabulously wealthy and buzzing with commerce. But there was a catch. While Flanders was technically a fief of the French crown, its heart and its wallet belonged to England, its primary wool supplier. King Philip the Fair of France, a man who very much lived up to his name and ambition, wanted total control. He saw Flanders' wealth and said, "I'll have some of that." He imposed crippling taxes and installed his own men to govern, completely ignoring the traditional rights and privileges of the Flemish cities. This created a massive rift within Flemish society. On one side, you had the wealthy patricians, the Leliards, who cozied up to the French king to protect their own interests. On the other side, you had the common folk, the weavers, the fullers, the butchers, the claws or klauwaerts, named after the lion on the Flemish coat of arms. They were losing their livelihoods and their freedoms, and they were getting angry. The tension finally exploded in 1302. After a period of French occupation, the people of Bruges had had enough. In the dead of night on May 18th, a group of rebels led by a weaver named Peter de Koninck and a butcher named Jan Breidel snuck back into their city. What followed was the Bruges Matins, a brutal targeted slaughter of the French garrison and their Leliard supporters. The rebels went from house to house using a clever password. Anyone who couldn't pronounce the Flemish phrase "schild en vriend," shield and friend, with a perfect local accent was cut down on the spot. It was a massacre, and it was a declaration of war. King Philip was, to put it mildly, furious. An army of commoners had just slaughtered his men. He assembled a magnificent force to crush the rebellion once and for all. We're talking about the cream of the French nobility, an army of around 2,500 heavily armored knights, backed by thousands of professional soldiers, crossbowmen, and infantry. Leading them was the formidable Robert II of Artois. This was the medieval equivalent of an all-star team, a gleaming wave of steel, silk, and chivalric pride. They were confident, arrogant, and expected a quick, easy victory. What could a bunch of weavers possibly do against them? Facing this juggernaut was the Flemish army, a sight to behold in its own right. It was a citizens' militia, about 9,000 strong, drawn from the guilds and towns of Flanders. These weren't professional soldiers. They were craftsmen, butchers, and farmers. Their main weapon wasn't the noble sword, but the Gurdendag, a wonderfully simple and terrifying weapon. Imagine a long, thick wooden staff, topped with a brutal iron spike. It could be used to bludgeon or to stab, perfect for unhorsing a knight and piercing his armor. Alongside the Gurdendag, they wielded long pikes, forming a bristling hedgehog of sharpened steel. Their leaders weren't dukes or princes. They were William of Jülich and Guy of Namur, grandsons of the imprisoned Count of Flanders, along with the heroes of Bruges, Peter de Koninck, and Jan Breidel. The two armies met on July 11, 1302, on a field just outside the city of Kortrijk. The Flemish had chosen their ground brilliantly. It was a marshy, uneven field, crisscrossed by streams and ditches, deliberately irrigated to make it even soggier. It was a terrible place for a cavalry charge. The Flemish arranged themselves in a solid, deep defensive line, their pikes and Gurdendags pointing towards the enemy. They were a wall of defiance. Robert of Artois, despite warnings from his advisors about the treacherous terrain, was blinded by arrogance. How could these peasants possibly stand against the flower of French chivalry? He ordered his infantry to soften up the Flemish line with arrows and crossbow bolts, but it had little effect. Impatient and overconfident, he gave the order he would come to regret. He sounded the charge. What happened next was medieval carnage. The French knights, thundering forward in a magnificent glittering wave, plunged straight into the mud. Their heavy war horses, the tanks of their day, floundered in the soggy ground, their momentum lost. The glorious charge turned into a chaotic, stumbling mess. As they struggled, they crashed right into the unyielding Flemish pike wall. It was a slaughterhouse. The Goedendags did their gruesome work, pulling knights from their saddles. Once on the ground, weighed down by dozens of pounds of armor, the knights were helpless. The Flemish swarmed them, using the spikes on their weapons to pierce the vulnerable gaps in their armor. At the neck, the armpits, the eyeslets of their helmets. The chivalric ideal of one-on-one combat vanished. This was brutal, efficient, and impersonal killing. In the midst of the chaos, Robert of Artois himself charged forward, trying to rally his men. He managed to cut his way deep into the Flemish lines, but he became isolated. Surrounded, pulled from his horse, he allegedly begged for his life, offering a huge ransom. But the Flemish weren't interested in money. This was about revenge. They showed him no mercy. The death of their commander shattered the morale of the remaining French forces. What was left of the proudest army in Europe broke and fled. The battle was over. The field was a wreck of dead men and horses. And in a final symbolic act of defiance, the victorious Flemish walked the battlefield, collecting the Golden Spurs from the heels of the hundreds of dead French nobles. They gathered over 500 pairs and hung them in the Church of Our Lady in Kortrijk as a trophy and a warning. This is what happens when you underestimate the will of a free people. The Battle of the Golden Spurs was a seismic shock that echoed across Europe. It proved that a well-organized, determined infantry army could defeat the supposedly invincible heavy cavalry of the feudal elite. Military tacticians everywhere took note. This battle marked a turning point, signaling the beginning of the end for the age of the knight and the dawn of the age of infantry. For Flanders, the victory was monumental. It secured their de facto independence from France for a time and became a cornerstone of their national identity. Even today, July 11th, is the official holiday of the Flemish community in Belgium. The battle represents a powerful story of resistance, of common people standing up against a powerful oppressor and winning against all odds. It's a timeless tale of how courage, clever tactics, and a really pointy stick can change the course of history. So the next time someone tells you a battle was won by knights in shining armor, remember the weavers and butchers of Flanders, the muddy field at Kortrijk, and the hundreds of golden spurs that told the world a new story. Thanks so much for watching. What do you think is the greatest underdog victory in history? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure.